Welcome back to the Done Deal show. I'm joined this morning by Sami Mokbel. Welcome to the Football Terrace, and thank you very much for joining us, mate.
Pleasure, Terry. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Lots to talk about this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're touching on Arsenal. We're looking at Zubimendi, their striker pursuit. We're going to have a stop at Chelsea and what they're doing in an attacking sense in the market. But we have to start. I mean, it's kind of broke the internet this morning. The deal has now been confirmed for Wirtz to Liverpool, 116 million, including add-ons. Massive deal for Liverpool to get over the line, Sami. Is that me that's frozen?
I'm there. No, I'm here. I'm here.
In my end. Do you hear what I said? Or
I heard about we're talking about Wirtz, yeah?
Yes, the Wirtz deal has now been announced and is complete, and obviously a huge deal for Liverpool.
It's massive. I can't see another deal unless there's something outrageous happens with someone like an Alexander Isak or something like that, which I can't see at the moment. It will most likely be the biggest deal of the summer. Liverpool have got their number one target. It's been pretty clear for the past 6 weeks, maybe slightly less, that Florian Wirtz was their primary transfer target, and they've executed 116 million all in. It's £100 million fixed fee, with an extra 16 million in add-ons linked to success that Liverpool will have in major competitions moving forward for the time that Wirtz is there. So it's not quite yet at British transfer record level, but it can be if Liverpool go on to win major trophies in the next few years. And it's expensive, but I think we've all seen the kind of qualities that he has, and obviously the profile. Right, he's 22, so he could have 4 great years at Liverpool, for example, for even 5 great years, and they could still recoup a lot of that 100 potential 60 million pounds that they've spent and committed. So for Liverpool, it ticks so many boxes, and it's a great signing for them. It's a massive signing.
It certainly does, and it's so typical of Liverpool to. There's a lot of talk of it being sort of 115s, 120s, rising to 150 million. But it's kind of typical of Liverpool to actually get a deal like this done for just below the British transfer record fee. So they don't actually end up breaking that record. They end up getting him cheaper than was first thought. They're just so good at negotiating.
Yeah, the optics of the deal, particularly with regard to the sort of the numbers involved, I think Liverpool have been quite keen to maybe express that, we have got a good deal here. We haven't paid over the odds. We haven't met the reported 150 million euro price tag that Bayer Leverkusen had put on Florian Wirtz. It's taken a while for them to negotiate the deal. I think there was some credible reports, really, I think, of the deal that had been completed earlier this week, maybe on Tuesday night. Yeah. I think it perhaps wasn't quite there yet, but it was certainly there or thereabouts. And obviously it's taken 48 hours now to have that deal signed, sealed and delivered. And I think all that's left now is for Florian Wirtz to have his medical, and he will become a Liverpool player.
Absolutely. I mean, as you've mentioned, the talent is undeniable. 22 years of age. This is why the fee, for me, yes, it brings pressure and expectation on delivery, and we've seen that before with Paul Pogba's and Lukaku's. When they've come in for these kind of monies, the pressure has been there to score goals, assist, drive your team over the line for trophies. At the same time, though, at 22 years of age, if he gives you a decade, that's 100 million base. That's what, £10 million a year. It isn't particularly a huge amount of money for a player of that quality. And as you state, if in 4 years, if in 5 years, he decides, thank you, England, thank you, Liverpool, I want to move on to Real Madrid, I now want to go and play for the biggest club in Germany, they'll try and do a better job than with Trent, but they'll renew that deal, and you'll still be able to sell him and get a large percentage of that money back. So I think this works. I think it's just win-win for Liverpool in many ways. I don't really think there's any threat of him flopping, as us fans would say as well. He just looks too good. He's sharp. He's got great physicality. There's excellent output. This just feels like an absolute win all round. And as a Man United fan, it's painful, but I've got to be honest, it feels like a real win, Sammy.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think every box in terms of the sort of that what you would look for in a transfer has been ticked here for Liverpool. Player, technical ability wise, tick. Financially, can we recoup the money in the future? Tick. Yes, they can. He's 22. Has he hit his ceiling yet? No. There's room for improvement. Tick. Everything about that deal is optimal, really, for Liverpool. I cannot see a downside. Look, every transfer has an element of risk, but that element of risk is generally down to someone not adapting to their new surroundings, or not reaching the kind of level of standards on the pitch that the buying club expected. But this is probably as low risk as you can possibly get, because this guy is a proper player, and and everyone will say, oh, it's the Bundesliga, the Premier League's a different kettle of fish. Yeah, it is a different kettle of fish, but everything that we've seen from all of the examples of his play and all of the videos, and anyone who's watched him on a regular basis will say he's got every attribute necessary to be a success in England. And yeah, I think he will, and it's an absolute no-brainer of a transfer.
It absolutely is. And just to answer a question here to our viewers that we will interact with live, yes, that is Sami Mokbel, as in the BBC's Sami Mokbel. This is him in person. You're not seeing things. DJ here says, great seeing Sami here. I hope for some positive transfer news regarding Chelsea. And DJ will be moving on to that soon. We had a question from Mo, who's watching in the chat. Big up, Mo. I hope you're well, brother. It says, could we expect any more major signings at Liverpool this summer, i.e. maybe a number 9?
I think the focus now will be on maybe moving players out of the club just to rebalance and recalibrate the finances a little bit. I don't think there's necessarily a need to do that, but I think modern day football and modern day finances in football are that there's got to be a little bit of give and take, and I think that the focus will now move towards that element of the window. They've done their business, they've got Wirtz through the door, they've got Frimpong through the door. Now they may start looking at, can we find a buyer for Darwin Núñez, for example? Can we move him out? If they can get good money for Darwin Núñez, I would not be surprised to see them later on in the window maybe go for a number 9. The problem with waiting to go for a number 9 or a striker, and I think most people would agree that they probably could do with one. The one issue with waiting for the outs to go out first is that you obviously risk missing out on the ones that are available now, because they're not many. There aren't many who are available. If you look around Europe, you could probably count them on one hand, right? Sesko, Gyökeres. Obviously, the one that everyone would love is Alexander Isak, but realistically, is he available?
Yeah, is there any? I mean, that's been Liverpool's number 1 target. Is there any sort of talk or chatter with the sources you have that Liverpool are trying to make inroads into that? Because the back end of the season, there was a lot of newspaper reports saying they were talking to his camp and pushing. Have you come across any information like that at all?
Yeah, no, not to the point where I've had it verified or been comfortable enough to write it, because I obviously or report it, because I haven't. But yeah, I'd be lying if I was to sit here and say even recently that I've not heard anything regarding Liverpool's interest in Alexander Isak. My biggest sort of the biggest concern about receiving that info is it financially viable? Because having just spent the money on Florian Wirtz, on obviously a little around 30 million on Frimpong, is there the finances, is there the financial firepower to go and do Alexander Isak, even say if he was to agitate and make clear that he wanted to move? Newcastle, he's still got 3 years left in his contract.
Yeah.
So, it's Newcastle are under no pressure whatsoever to sell Isak this summer, particularly having just made the Champions League. So for Isak to come out of Newcastle, you would have to force Newcastle's hand. And personally, I don't see Newcastle budging for anything less than like 150 million quid. Are they, are Liverpool going to pay that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Joe, what's really interesting for me is, as you say, viewers need to understand this. That I'm speaking about you in a third person slightly here, but Sami's obviously an actual journalist. He's not a fan channel like ourselves, where if we see a report or a rumor that there's talks between Liverpool wanting Isak, we can go live on that and we can talk about it. Because, and I always say, people often say this to me, Terry, you ruin your credibility if you report on this. I'm not reporting on anything. I'm not a journalist. I'm talking about a news story and I'm gathering fan opinion. It's a very different job to what you have, Sami, where you must get lots of whispers and twitters and little sound bites. But if you wrote an article off of every single rumor and whisper, you'd lose a lot. You and your papers and the networks would lose a lot of credibility. You've got to try your best to wait until it's verified or moving along, surely.
You absolutely, and I can't stress to you the number of times that I've missed kind of exclusivity on a story because I just haven't been comfortable enough to write it. So I've not had it verified. And there is a risk attached to that, but you're doing it for the right reasons, right? You're doing it because what you want to put out into the public domain, what you want to report is as factually as correct as you can believe you can possibly make it.
Yeah.
Now, for example, if someone was to sort of text me today saying Liverpool are signing Alexander Isak for 150 million quid, right? For starters, your radar's up, is like, because that seems inconceivable to me, having just committed 116 million quid to Bayer Leverkusen to sign Florian Wirtz. So that immediately you've got that concept of doubt in your head. And then, you would then go and try and check that with the agent. You would then try and check that with the club. And the people will have different ways of operating. Journalists have different ways of operating, but particularly working for the BBC as well. I'd much rather be right than first. And there is, and that does mean that I will maybe occasionally, I say occasionally, a lot of the time, not be the first to report something. But what I prefer to do is to make sure that when I do report something, that I believe it's factually correct.
And that makes an absolute lot of sense as well. Viewers, do us a big favor, please, and hit the like button if you haven't done so already. Get this stream shared across your social media platforms as well. Moving on and into Arsenal. The first deal I think a lot of our viewers will want to get your insight on is Zubimendi to Arsenal. What of these rumors from Spain that there was a phone call and Madrid have turned his head and things are going to happen? What's your understanding, Sami, of the latest in relation to Zubimendi becoming an Arsenal player?
Yeah, I'm sure as I can be that Zubimendi will be an Arsenal player at the start of pre-season. I saw the reports, and I've seen and I've kind of sort of consistently seen Madrid's interest floated in Spain. But what I can say for absolutely certain is Arsenal are preparing for Martin Zubimendi to arrive in time for pre-season. I think and I've reported this, and I've said this on other shows. I think there is. I believe that relevant paperwork has been completed / signed, which would then make it very difficult for that move not to happen, and it would take Zubimendi to renege, I think, contractually on those agreements for it not to happen. If he was to renege, for example, because obviously you can't, contracts and paperworks are just pieces of paper, right? If he physically reneges, then my understanding of that situation is then that would, I will be careful slightly, but that would then open up a can of
legal worms.
Legal
worms, essentially.
Legally, it would open up a can of worms.
And this, Sammy, is where this deal feels a little different from when Liverpool had an agreement, because as you've said, there are legally binding pieces of paperwork that have been agreed this time around, where with Liverpool it was all just verbal, as far as my understanding is aware. So there is less chance at this point, far less chance of the mind of Zubimendi being changed like he did when he agreed the Liverpool move.
If that information is correct about the paperwork, and I'm confident enough to say it on here now, so I'm pretty confident that information is correct. If that paperwork has been completed and has been kind of rubber stamped and ratified, then it would be almost a breach of those conditions for him to then renege on not going to Arsenal and either staying at Sociedad or going to Madrid. I just can't see that situation. Not that I know Martin Zubimendi, but I just don't see how that situation is feasible.
Well, do you know what it is? Like, we see some of the press in Spain saying it, and I very much, doing the job that I do in the fan space, I don't disregard any media outlet and go, absolute lies, no way that's true. I've learned not to do that, because I remember when Nuno Santos went to Spurs. I know Nuno because I used to be in private banking, and he was one of my clients, right? So I knew him through that. And I remember the news came through, and it was a very random Turkish media outlet that reported on it, and it went viral. I remember texting him going, "Is this true?" And he just sent back smiling emojis, and I thought, "Oh, okay, it might be true." And then it broke, and then it went out there, and that was a moment where I realized I'm not just going to discount a journalist or a newspaper because they seem to have a bias towards a certain club. And the reason why this Turkish paper picked it up is I didn't realize at the time he was heavily linked to the Galatasaray job. So therefore their journalists were doing their digging. So it ended up making more sense than just some random article. But what I would say about the Zubimendi deal is, barring the media outlets close to Madrid, nowhere else is reporting about a U-turn, this phone call, or anything else. So I understand why you feel confident, and my message to Arsenal fans has just been, try and stay as patient as you can. I know they want him over the line, they want to see the shirt being held. Do you have any idea of when the medical might be? Have you heard anything around sort of timelines between now and when that will happen?
So there is so that process in terms of booking in that medical has started. I think they're in dialogue with trying to book that in, and they have been for a number of weeks. From what I understand, I actually reported something similar maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. They wanted to get the Nations League games out of the way first, which they've been done now. The international break is over, so the focus now will be getting him over to do that ahead of pre-season so that he can sign. There is some talk, and I had a conversation about this with a contact on Monday, that Sociedad would like the deal done in July for, I think it's sort of, there is a tax reason attached to that. They'd rather have that deal ratified next month rather than this month. But that's obviously that's easily solvable. That isn't going to be a problem given what we've spoken about with the paperwork
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
And that's also why fans need to. Yeah, that's also something why I think fans need to remain relaxed, because for Arsenal, yes, they want to get the deal over the line and announce for their supporters. But again, this is a great way of building up some rapport with a football club like Real Sociedad, because you've bought players before. Well, Arsenal bought players before, and they might want to do that again in future. So again, you keep those relationships as good as possible. It just makes a lot of sense, as you say, to keep those relationships as healthy and as good as possible for future deals. In terms of other goings on at Arsenal, there's been a lot of talk this week about Gyokeres, a lot of talk about Benjamin Sesko. What's your understanding of their striker pursuit currently in terms of number one target? Are the reports? Have you had any confirmed reports of the meetings this week with Gyokeres? What's your understanding of those circumstances, Sami?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. You sort of finished the last part of the Zubimendi section there with about the sort of the context about maintaining relationships with clubs, and I think that's a very sort of key point to stress here with regards to Benjamin Sesko. Now, there was a lot of obviously Arsenal were kind of looking for, or they were looking for a striker in January because of what happened to Gabriel Jesus with that knee injury. And I think a lot of fans there was a frustration that they didn't just slap a load of money in the table in January to make a bid for Sesko in the January window to bring that deal forward. My understanding as to why they didn't do that was because they'd had a conversation with RB Leipzig just to gauge whether they would be interested in selling Sesko in the January window. And it was an unequivocal no. He's not for sale at any price. We want him here until the summer. You know, having that wouldn't have prevented Arsenal from making an offer. But what they didn't want to do is antagonise RB Leipzig ahead of the summer when they knew they would, again, if they couldn't get Sesko in January, which was very, very unlikely. They didn't want to just to make a bid for him and then antagonise RB Leipzig, which would then impact on their discussions with them in the summer. And it's no secret at the moment, is it, that RB Leipzig and Arsenal are in discussions over a potential move for Benjamin Sesko ahead of next season. With regards to that, I think those discussions are still very amicable. They're ongoing. I know there's been a lot of talk about those, about them closing in on an agreement. I think I don't know if I genuinely don't know, and I've not had verified that they're that close. The last check I made, I have to say, was a week ago. It was last Friday, and my information then was yes, there's been discussions, but we're not particularly close to an agreement. But I think there is big. I think that there is big backing at Arsenal behind the scenes from very influential people for them to do that Sesko deal. That's not to say that they will do it, because the numbers have to be right, and that's where they are at the moment. But if they can't strike a deal with Benjamin Sesko, provided he's still available, I think they know that they can probably do a deal with Sporting for Viktor Gyokeres. In terms of Gyokeres, is he 26, 27?
Yeah, 27 Gyokeres, yeah.
27. In terms of how I know sort of how Arsenal operate, that might just be a smidgen over in terms of age, over what they would prefer to pay with that kind of money for a player of that expense, because you're then looking at dead money, aren't you? There's probably there's no realistic possibility of getting a big chunk of that money back, because once you reach 28, 29, you're sort of, as everyone knows, your value as a player goes down quite significantly. So to answer your question, is there a preferred candidate? I think if I was a betting man, I would say that Sesko is a tad ahead in the thinking of everyone at Arsenal. But that isn't to say we should discount someone like Victor Gyokeres, or even beyond that, maybe even like an Ollie Watkins, who will be available for far less than both Sesko and Gyokeres. But obviously there's the age thing there again, with the profile of age and the sell on and the resale value and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there is still work to be done from Arsenal's end to establish which one they are going to go for. I think it will be Sesko, but yeah, I couldn't sit here confidently and tell you absolutely the one that they are going to sign, because there's a lot of variables
there is, and I think
we shouldn't also forget.
Yeah, sorry,
go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, but this is what Berta does as well. What I was reading from David Ornstein and The Athletic is what you're seeing at Arsenal is very much how Berta operates. So yes, there might be some information that comes out that Sesko's number one, some that comes out that it's Gyokeres, some that this deal is slightly further along than it's meant to be, or is that they're working on 2 or 3 deals at the same time. And I've read that he likes to get deals almost to a point where they're going to complete before they actually make their final decision. Not because they're trying to throw the press off. It's just that's how he likes to operate. So that they've got their number one target that's there, but the number 2 target's also closer. If they miss out, they can pivot quite quickly. And that in itself as an approach must be quite difficult for journalists, where football fans, and because you'll even see it in our comment section today. Personally, I wouldn't look at it while I'm talking, because it could be off-putting, but it's one of those things where everybody I want a definitive answer today on what's going on. The issue is with Arsenal this year, I think it's very hard to give a definitive answer about where deals exactly are and who number one targets are. Again, I really respect the fact that going on all the things and a few people in the comments said that how much does Sami know? Well, Sami broke the news about Zubimendi becoming an Arsenal player, so that's what Sami knows. Sami has his contacts, but it does feel like it feels like a little bit of a minefield for journalists, and you must get this a lot on socials. Like if you say something and then the news changes a day later, your notifications and mentions must be lovely for about 12 to 24 hours.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. When you get something wrong, Twitter uses it very quickly to remind you that you're, use an expression, you're in the mud. Your reputation's in the mud is one I get a lot, which is why I guess journalists have to be careful with what they report, because their reputations hinge on that. Like I've come on now and sort of given you an overview of where I believe the Arsenal striker situation is, but I haven't written that yet, if I'm honest. Well, I haven't written that because I know that once you report that and that's out in the public domain, people will use that as a stick to beat you with. If it doesn't, if it doesn't come off, so you just end up keeping your powder dry and not doing anything. The other point that we should also add in terms of the striker search is, again, I'll go back to Alexander Isak. He is the ultimate number one target for Arsenal without a shadow of a doubt, but and has universal backing at the club through everyone there. But I think, as I said earlier, there is a concern that deal just isn't realistic at the moment.
Yeah, I mean that can also be a reason why the work for other strikers is slow. I mean, just logically speaking, it's seen as though it won't happen. But if you get all your business done by the 13th of June, and then I don't know, 1st of July comes, and Isak's had his holiday, and whilst on holiday, has decided with his girlfriend or wife, I don't know if he's married, I want to leave Newcastle. Arsenal might sit there and go, we got our business done too soon. We now can't move for this individual. Because I always remember when Messi couldn't redo his deal at Barcelona, I always felt had City not gone and spent £100 million on Grealish, I think they'd have swooped in for Lionel Messi. And he won trophies there, Grealish, but I think Messi might have been a better signing for them because it's Lionel Messi. So there is that element as well for Arsenal fans to consider that, yes, you often want to get business done quickly, but there isn't sometimes an element of waiting, and the waiting game can sometimes yield some better opportunities. Man United might get that with Gyokeres. We wanted the lap. Let's go for him. Let's get one over the line early. Didn't happen. We might now end up with Gyokeres, who I think is a much better striker. And for the short term, I think will deliver more. So sometimes missing out on a target can help you. And I see it a lot because we cover a lot of transfers as a fan channel. The impatience sometimes of football fans is I love them because they're part of they're what we make content for. But the impatience can be crazy, Sammy. The impatience can be absolutely crazy.
But I think what you've pointed out there about the what ifs. What if Isak, for whatever reason, or someone like a Julian Alvarez, for whatever reason, does become available in July? Something might have happened that you can't tell the future. What if he does, and you've already done the majority of your money?
Yeah,
there is a risk attached to waiting, of course, because then you risk missing out on the targets that are available at the moment. But there is always a risk attached to any kind of transfer.
Yeah,
I genuinely think what you just said there is an element of Arsenal's thinking. I don't think, I'm pretty sure that is an element of, right, do we press the button now on Sesko or Gyökeres or Watkins when we kind of just, what happens if Isak's situation does change, or Alvarez, for example. I'm not saying he's an absolute definitive target, but I know they've spoken about him.
Yeah.
What if that does change? What if that changes? And we haven't got the money to do it. So yeah, it's, as I say, there's always risks attached to these transfers, and missing out on people later on in the window is one of those risks that you take.
Absolutely. In terms of centre backs, there's been the link, both Chelsea and Arsenal, to Hato. Have you heard much about that? Is that a deal that could progress this summer?
Yeah, I've heard both. If I'm honest, both clubs are interested. Arsenal have got a long-term interest in Hato. I think Chelsea are more recently to the table for him. Is he a left footer? Is he a centre back?
I think so. I want to say he's left-footed.
Centre-back,
I want to say he's left-footed. Yeah, he's left-footed. You're right. Yes. Yeah. He plays centre-back and can play left-back as well, but he's left-footed.
Yes,
Yeah.
He's a left-footed centre-back. Now, what I would say about Arsenal signing a centre-back is, how often are you going to play? Because I think those two at the moment, Saliba and obviously Gabriel, when he's fit, I don't think you're dislodging either of those two out of the starting 11. So they're definitely interested in a centre back, 100%, because they tried to sign Højlund, and I know those conversations went quite well. Well, obviously he ended up at Real Madrid, but they were trying to convince Højlund to come. But again, I think the issue that they run into there was, how often is he going to play when you've got two imperious centre backs who are the bedrock of what Mikel Arteta was building there.
Yeah, it was such an interesting dynamic, that, because it felt easier for Højlund to get game time at Real Madrid than at Arsenal. So
100%.
And they are obviously the bigger club, more attractive club historically. He's Spanish, but equally game time, he's walking into that Madrid team where it's a lot harder for him at Arsenal. So that'd be an interesting one to watch because obviously Chelsea are looking at him as well. They want to improve their backline ahead of an important season. What's your understanding of the latest with them as well? Because one of their big targets in Nico Williams, I mean Arsenal also linked to Nico Williams, reportedly given permission now to speak to Bayern Munich. You've got the Ekitike deal, which seems to have been put on ice for the time being. What's your understanding of the latest goings on in the attacking elements at Chelsea?
So in terms of Nico Williams, again, there's obviously an Arsenal element to this. I think the interest in both players is undeniable. I think in both clubs in Nico Williams is clear. I think he's obviously a wonderful player, and a lot of top clubs would be in the market to sign him if it was possible. What my understanding of that situation is that the release clause, and you'll have to remind me of how much it is. I think it's something like maybe 55.
Yeah, I think it's 55 million euros. Yes, correct.
Yeah, but I think that needs to be paid. What I'm told is that needs to be, so you need to obviously go to the Spanish Federation and you've got to do that in one hit. Yes. You've got to pay that in one hit, which is a lot.
Yeah,
and it wipes out a lot of your basically summer budget, because you can't pay that. You can't fraction it up in installments.
Yeah,
that's certainly. And then on top of that, when you pay X amount of money in one hit, there are tax elements and other additional payment and financial elements that are attached to that. And I think that is what, as for example, that's Arsenal were very interested in Nico Williams, but I also believe that is an element of why they haven't, because people will just will look at it and say 55 million quid is an absolute snip for someone like euros is an absolute snip for someone of Nico Williams' quality. Why don't you just go and pay the money, get it done? But it's because of the context of how the money has to be paid.
Yeah, exactly. You look at because you look at the Cunha. It's why I mean, there's reports that's what Arsenal are also doing with Sociedad. They're looking to actually pay more than the
they're
release
paying
fee.
over the release.
Yeah,
they definitely are. Yeah.
And that's probably why you find this deal is delayed. They're obviously slowing this down for these tax purposes for Sociedad. But Sociedad are fine to go, okay, well, look, pay us more money and we'll take the cash over a longer period of time. But you're helping us out. There's a little bit of quid pro quo in there as well. And I think that's why football fans have got to learn about the finances. Plus, I think with Nico Williams as well, there's reports he's asking for sort of 250 to 300k a week as well. There's big agent fee involved. So there are much bigger costs attached to this for Arsenal and Chelsea than just a small 55 million euro release clause.
Absolutely nailed on. It's the cost of the deal is far reaching than just the fee. The fee alone is as I say, it needs to be paid in one hit. So that's really expensive for a summer that takes a massive hole out of someone's summer budget. And then when you couple that with the wages that you say are going to be, from what we understand, are really high, touching 300, maybe even more, then the agent fees, other additional costs. I can see why there is maybe a reluctance to push the button on that deal for both clubs.
Absolutely. And with Chelsea, what about the situation with Ekitike? They were very hot on his trail. That slowed down. There have been some reports, Sami, that they've got the number 9 now in the lap. And we have Ben Jacobs, who I'm sure you're aware of on the show regularly, who has stated that there is an indication coming out of Chelsea that they may not go for another number 9. Ekitike's price tag is currently 100 million euros, which is a huge investment for such a young player who's not yet sort of reached his full potential. What are you hearing in relation to their pursuit of him and what can Chelsea fans expect?
Yeah, I've heard similar with regards to the fee and Ekitike. I think it's too cash heavy. I think it's too expensive for Chelsea at this moment in time. I think there has been dialogue with regards to that deal and whether they believe it's financially viable for them to do. they're interested. I think that's clear. But having signed the lap and now obviously with the option of Nicholas Jackson there, maybe paying 100 million euros for a striker is maybe just a bit too kind of far out of reach for Chelsea at the moment. But obviously they asked the question. I think they've had a conversation. But yeah, I think that it seems a lot. It seems a lot, and I'm not quite sure for that price that they would go for it.
Yeah, it's especially as they've given the number 9 shirt to the lap. That I know that the shirt number doesn't always mean everything, but it's been so well reported, Sammy, that they've given him the shirt number. They've told the lap he is the new main number 9, and I know Ekitike can play off the striker. I know he's got an ability to play in slightly wider positions, but at the same time, you just think 84 million. Even if they get 10 million off that, 74 million, 75 million for the second choice striker, 74 million for a striker to play out in wider positions. I mean, you're maybe better off putting that money towards the targets like Gittins and Garnacho, who are naturally right-footed, left-handed wingers, as opposed to a makeshift position for somebody. So, yeah, it just... I'm only going by the media reports that I've read and what we've had journalists come on the Football Terrace and say, but it doesn't feel like that one's necessarily going to happen, especially at the prices that Frankfurt are asking for. It feels, as you say, a little bit cash heavy and a little bit too much at this particular moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they will focus their attentions on getting a conventional attacking wide midfielder. They've had a conversation about Mohamed Kudus at West Ham, who's got an 85 million release clause. Again, I'm not sure that they would be willing to meet that price tag and the release clause. But I think also West Ham are open to maybe negotiating that, because I think they would like to recoup money from Kudus and reinvest that into the squad this summer. Gittins, as you said, is one that they've pursued, not able to get over the line, but I think they might revisit that situation at some point in the summer. I think that the bulk of those negotiations are done, and I think that it just needs fine tuning. So the base of that is there. And Garnacho, you've mentioned Garnacho there. There's an interest from Chelsea, albeit I think at the moment rather tentative. I think he could cost around £60 million, which is again quite cash heavy for someone who is a fantastic player, but perhaps maybe hasn't produced it on a consistent basis in the Premier League. But they've got options. That's the thing.
Yeah, as DJ in our comments here says, not Garnacho, please, Terry, rather Kudus and Gittins. Well, Gittins has agreed the personal terms. That feels like a deal that will probably happen after the after the World Club Cup. But what's also interesting is they've also got Giovanni Quenda coming in next year. So again, I'm not trying to pour cold water on it. I'm just trying to think logically. Are they going to sign 2 left-sided attackers for big money this summer and then have Kenda come in next year? Because what I'm hearing from a lot of Chelsea fans is, we'll get Gittins and then we'll buy an experienced wide player. And I think, okay, well, maybe, but you've got Quenda coming in next year. I don't see how that... do you get where I'm coming from in terms of you're almost creating a bottleneck of players next season? I don't see... And I know that some Chelsea fans are like, it doesn't matter, it's survival of the fittest, but it does matter to a certain extent. It does matter to a certain... You can't just keep spending money, especially on players that we'll all expect to be in and around the first team. And I could be reading it wrong, but it just feels... I feel like it's going to be someone like a Gittins, and that might be it, potentially. They've got obviously that Esteval as well coming in.
Yeah. You can't... look, there has to be an element of forward planning with these with the transfer market. If you know you've got arrivals next summer, that has to be factored into what you're doing in that present moment in time. and that will certainly be a factor for sort of Lawrence Stewart there and Paul Winstanley, the two sporting directors. And I can't see them going heavy on a deal for Ekitike. I think they would do it for the right money if they managed to get the deal to a price that they were comfortable with. But I don't think they're going to go gung ho for it and pay over the odds, just because, as you sort of correctly say, Terry, they've got options.
Yeah, and I think Esteval comes in this summer. He plays on the right-hand side predominantly, but there's a lot of talk that he's going to be given a fair chance, and it just may be one of those things where if Gittins comes in with Kenda coming in next year, Esteval coming in, they've got the lap over the line. Again, they could come and sign more experience, and a lot of Chelsea fans want more experience. But then if you sign that experience and they're ready to go now, how are these young in those same positions? How are these youngsters going to get the game time to develop? I mean, and that's not, and that's, if you're winning games, some Chelsea fans won't care, but you've bought them to develop them. There has to be, there's a lot of money being invested. It isn't like you've picked up some of these players for a cheeky £5 million. No one knows who they are. This is big money that's being invested into these players. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We've got a big show later on this afternoon. We've got Chelsea fan Don on, who's going to come on and have his say. As Maradon here says, we need Y Scout. We've got a guy that comes on called Don, great guy, but everything, he goes on Y Scout, does his research, and then he tells us, he predicts the future off of Y Scout. There, he really, really does. Viewers, get hitting that like button for us, please, right now. Any questions you've got for Sami, throw them in. If he's got answers, he'll give them. If he doesn't know anything about that deal, he'll tell you, because he's an honest man. And that's what we like to see. He did it to me. In fact, I need to apologize to, what's her name? We have I want to say it's Sophie, but I don't know because I'm terrible at remembering names. It's Sophie, who's a Newcastle fan. We're meant to get a Newcastle update with Ben Jacobs. Didn't have time on Wednesday. So I asked Sami, but it's not really a team that Sami covers, which he was very honest about. So don't have really any breaking news other than what Sami has said about Isak not sounding like it's a deal that will happen this summer. But that's also another reason why Sami is to be trusted, because he could have just went, right, I'll just go and read some Newcastle news and play it off as my own. But what he said is, don't know anything about it really, so I'm not going to touch on it. That's always
what I can say about Newcastle.
No, sorry, go on.
They're definitely interested in Crystal Palace captain Mark Gouiri. That is an ongoing process. There we go. That I'm not saying he's going to end up there, but he's got options. But I can say that there is an interest.
That'd be a good signing for them. I think he's an excellent player. He's an excellent player. He really, really is. He'll be missed at Palace as well. I also thought last summer, I thought he was England's best player at the Euros as well. I thought he was fantastic. He really, really was fantastic. True Gunner here says, were the meetings with yesterday or 2 days ago with Sporting true?
I can't sit here and tell you that I know definitively the answer. I was led to believe yesterday that there were inaccuracies in that report, but I respect the report, absolutely respect it, and I'm sure there is value in it, and I'm sure whoever's written those reports I'm sure that they've sourced and verified that information, and I respect it, but I've not managed to get that information over the line yet.
Do you find as a journalist that different nations report on stories in a different way? For instance, you may be told Arsenal made a bid. You may contact agents, contact the club, and they say no official bid was made, but there have been some verbal offers made. Have you seen, and then that's maybe how you'll print that. You'll put together an article and you'll put it out there as a verbal offer made. Do you find that some nations, the journalists will just go, that's a bid, mate. Official, verbal, unofficial, it's still a bid, and they print it as a bid. Do you find as a journalist you come across this where you're all getting the similar information, but the interpretations and language used is kind of different in that way?
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's semantics, isn't it? A verbal, if me and you having a negotiation about your house, and I say to you, I want to give you 100K for your house, right? As a verbal offer.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and then you go and tell whoever, a journalist, for example, that I've just had, Sammy's just given me a verbal offer of 100K. The person you've just communicated that to is probably accurate to say that's a bid. You've made an
offer.
A bid.
Yeah.
An offer. Whereas for me, maybe I might think until that's put in writing or on an email, that it's just me and you negotiating at the moment.
Yes.
So, but it's kind of swings and roundabouts with that. It depends. You're absolutely right. It is semantics, and it is how you.
I think football fans have caused this problem though. It's us, and I'll give you an example, because whenever I hear personal terms will be no problem, for someone who worked alongside footballers for a number of years, well, that means Manchester United have spoken to the agents, either directly or indirectly, said this is what we would pay. This will be the shirt number. This will be the status in the squad, etc., etc. The player has said that will be acceptable. I will sign that paperwork. So for me, again, maybe it's because I'm working class and growing up, a lot of our deals, a lot of the things we did was all just what we said to each other and we shook hands, right? For me, that's personal terms agreed. What I love what it's become is personal terms will be no problem. But I understand why journalists write that, because then if another journalist says personal terms haven't been agreed yet, because their view is they're only agreed when they're signed, it becomes, as you say, the notifications pop off, tit for tat, your credibility, you're a mug, you know what you're talking about. When actually, in essence, everybody's reporting the same information. It's just how you view it. And as I say, if I offer you a job and I'll say, this is what I'm going to pay you, and you go, that will be acceptable, you've agreed to the base terms of what we're spoken about. And I would tell KJ, who's backstage, Sammy's coming on board. He's agreed to the terms. Just because you ain't, that's my interpretation. So I do think that, as you say, there's a lot of semantics that go on, and fans are just so desperate. And they're not just desperate, Sammy, for news. They're desperate for the news they want. So if you come on here today and go, Isak's the number one target and it's going to happen, every Arsenal fan thinks you're amazing. Every Newcastle fan thinks you're a lying fool. And then if the deal collapsed, the Newcastle fans will be on you, you lied. And then Arsenal fans will be like, hang on, you promised us. When in essence, it might just be the players changed his mind. Poor old Sami Mokbel, he's sitting there going, hang on a minute. I didn't do anything. No,
but it's like that is a whole new layer of thought process for a journalist with social media, with Twitter and X nowadays. That you are immediately called out. If transfers change, information, things change, right? But people, sort of Twitter users, will. Sammy's written this. It's definitely, that's what's happened. It's definitely going to happen. But if something changes, then that isn't the journalist's fault. So, but because I'm aware of that now, is that you are so reluctant to write something or report something, because if it moves on and there are developments in the future that go against what you've written, then, as you say, you are in the, to use an expression that people use on Twitter, you are in the mud. So it really is.
Mate, it's everything as well. I stream, we get watched by a few million people a month, and you only have to have a slip of the tongue on something you say, and there's a clip, and you're getting battered for days, and it's the kind of nature of that beast. One other link to Arsenal I want to get your view on. I've seen sort of Ornstein and others speak about in the last few days is Rodrygo. Is this a deal that are you aware that Arsenal are? I'll quote the Spanish press, in love with the idea of him becoming an Arsenal player. Is that something you think they will pursue if it becomes concrete that he'll leave Real Madrid?
Yeah, I think it's a way to. They're definitely interested, but I think if Rodrygo is available, and I think there's still sort of some time before we can actually say that. I think it's pretty clear that all of Europe's top clubs are going to be in for Rodrygo, and Arsenal would place themselves in that bracket. If a player of that level becomes available, then you're automatically going to be interested. But as ever with transfers, you know, it will be about the finances, and I can't imagine Real Madrid for a 23-year-old established international would be letting someone like Rodrygo go, even if he speaks to Xabi Alonso and Xabi Alonso tells him you're not going to play as often as you'd like. I just can't see them doing that deal cheaply, and it's going to that'd be a really expensive deal to do. So when you've got to do a striker as well, I just wonder if the finances are there to stretch that far. But
Yeah,
there is an interest still.
It feels like one. I know it's a word again that football fans don't like, but it feels like it might be a market opportunity later in the window if he becomes available. But again, you look at the Williams deal, you look at Arsenal being linked to Sane, which, you know, he's obviously gone to Galatasaray now for good money. There's an element here of and there's a risk, as you say, if you wait too long, you might end up losing 2 or 3 top targets. But if you move too early, your main target or the best option, you also may miss out on. So you've got to get the waiting game right, and it's going to be an intriguing one to watch play out over the course of the window. Sami, listen, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on the show today and giving us your insight and thoughts on some of these deals. It'd be great to get you back on the show again. Viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. Really do appreciate you all being here every single day. Please hit the like button before you leave and make sure you're all subscribing. We are back at 3:30 with Straight Facts with Don, Lawless and Staffy. I'm live at 2 p.m. on the United Stand as well, talking all things Manchester United. So if you want to join me over there at 2 p.m., it would be lovely to see you all. But until next time, everybody, look after yourselves. Take care. Goodbye. God bless. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.